So you guys are probably familiar with the Stop Woke Act. Law prohibits teaching certain concepts related to race. The prohibited teachings were that members of one race, color, national origin, or sex are morally superior to members of another. Okay, fine. That seems fine to me. A person by virtue of his or her race, color, national origin, or sex is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously. Depending on the definition of inherently here, this is pretty variable. Obviously, nobody is inherently anything as a product of being white, but you could absolutely make the argument that white people have a disposition towards certain beliefs, given the types of things they tend to be taught in this country. I think that's fine. A person's moral character or status as either privileged or oppressed is necessarily determined by his race, color, national origin, or sex. And this is psychotic. This means right here that it is illegal to teach that any particular demographic of people is privileged or oppressed. Literally. Necessarily determined by his race, color, national origin, or sex. Members of one race, etc., should not attempt to treat others without respect. Okay, fine. A person by virtue of his race, etc., bears responsibility for or should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment because of actions committed in the past by other members of his same race, etc. A person by virtue of his or her race, etc., should be discriminated against or adverse treatment, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So it's basically the same line we've seen from conservatives for a while, where it seems like they're promoting a kind of race-blind, egalitarian approach towards education on racial issues. But in reality, what they're doing is making it illegal to even teach about oppression. And so, today, Desantis admin rejects inclusion of AP African American Studies class in Florida high schools. So there you go. They have just banned AP African American Studies in Florida high schools. There you go. But why wasn't there an AP White American Studies class, I hear you ask? Yeah, this is obviously incredibly dangerous. The reason for this, of course, is because the only thing, people like DeSantis want you to know about black people's history in this country is that slavery happened, but then white people saved them from slavery, and now we all live in equal harmony under the law. And any systemic inequalities between white people and black people are a product of people failing to meet their mark in the free marketplace of ideas or whatever. The administration of Ron DeSantis is blocking a new advanced placement course for high school students on African American studies. In a January 12th letter to the College Board, the nonprofit org that oversees AP coursework, the Florida Department of Education's Office of Articulation, said the course is explicably contrary to Florida law and significantly lacks educational value. Of course, the letter did not elaborate on what the agency found objectionable in the course content. So this is where we're at right now. Just a group of bureaucrats who are allegiant to Ron DeSantis can look at a anti-racist, because of course learning about black history in America is a fundamentally anti-racist exercise. One of the greatest drives of racists in this country is to deny you the education and the awareness of what has happened to black people so they can lie and make it seem as though the outcomes of their treatment are actually just the product of them sucking. And they don't elaborate on it. They just say it, A spokeswoman for the department did not immediately respond to the CNN query. In the future, should College Board be willing to come back to the table with lawful, historically accurate content, FDOE will always be willing to reopen the discussion, the letter said. No clarification. In a statement to CNN, the College Board declined to directly address the decision in Florida, but said, "We look forward to bringing this rich and inspiring exploration of African American history and culture to students across the country." The rejection of an AP African American Studies course follows efforts by DeSantis to overhaul Florida's educational curriculum to limit teaching about critical race theory. Now, of course, critical race theory is not being taught to any high school students at all. What they actually mean by critical race theory is any education on the history of and contemporary nature of the oppression of black people in this country. Banned material. The law also banned material from the 1619 Project, a Pulitzer Prize-winning project by the New York Times to reframe American history around the arrival of slave ships on American shores. Man, if this channel gets big enough, I bet DeSantis will ban my videos from being shown in Florida high schools too. Not that they should be. DeSantis signed a bill restricting how schools can talk about race with students. Irrelevant backstory. In a Twitter post Wednesday, Democratic State Senator Chevron Jones, who is black, noted, wow, idpol? noted that Florida offers other cultural AP courses. This political extremism and its attack on black history and black people is going to create an entire generation of black children who won't be able to see themselves reflected at all within their own education or in their state. I don't like this rebuttal here. I actually dislike it quite a bit. While I agree representation is important, the goal here is not to simply deny black children the ability to hear, to see themselves reflected in their curriculum. The goal here is to destroy knowledge and to destroy history. If you gave conservatives the chance, they wouldn't even teach slavery. You all understand that, right? All they would say is that slavery was a fact of the world until America was the first country where white people generously liberated black people with their enlightened... I'm not making this up. They literally said this in their patriotic education pamphlet. That thing that was presented by the Trump administration in 2020 came from Charlie Kirk. This is already what they say. We're talking about people who are still 150 years later saying that the Civil War was about states' rights or that it was started by the North. Yeah, the lost cause myth. We're talking about people whose goal for history is explicitly political, and not at all different from the same goals that, say, Nazis have when it comes to teaching their version of World War II and Holocaust history. A Nazi, when examining a historical curriculum, would make edits not out of an interest to, deny black or Jewish children the ability to see themselves reflected in whatever. They would try to eliminate certain elements of history, to eliminate knowledge itself, in the hope that they could eventually destroy the knowledge that made clear the evil of their political program. That's the goal, right? And that's exactly what they're trying to do here. Modern Republicans, broadly at the very least supportive of racism, you have people like Desantis, who I swear to God would not at all mind going back to the slave days. They just want to construct curriculums which lead people towards accepting that ideology. What was it? He who controls the past controls the future? Exactly. That's a 1984 quote. They rewrote history to make it so Jews were the reason they lost World War I, not poor leadership. Yeah, that's right. When Nazis took power in Germany, they made an effort to rewrite the history of their country in World War I and did so in a way that pinned the blame of their loss on Jewish people rather than, well, World War I was a cluster. They lost for a lot of reasons, but it wasn't the Jews. That was not one of the causes. The Robert E. Lee Memorial, Richmond, Virginia, 2013, 2020, and now. Yeah. Do remember that the vast majority of the Confederate memorials erected across the country were erected after the Confederacy fell, and they did so explicitly to intimidate, terrify, and beleaguer civil rights protesters or just black people in black communities. You see, during the 30s and the 60s, that's when they were erected. There is no reason to erect a Confederate memorial statue during the 1960s except to explicitly slay, they wish they could slay, to explicitly say, watch yourself, you uppity black. That's it. Literally. Hey, this is what we did to you, we'll do it again. That's it. That's literally it. And behind every conservative who defended the continued existence of these statues, that is what they support as well. No ambiguity to it. Y'all remember that PragerU video where they were giving you a little history lesson on the life of Robert E. Lee and included, in a positive tone, him putting down a slave revolt? You remember that? Explicitly in that, and they took down that PragerU video too. They removed that one. You know how bad a video's got to be for PragerU to delete it?
After 30 years of military service, Lee led U.S. Marines to crush the attempted slave rebellion by radical abolitionist John Brown in October 1859.
Wait, you're selling that as a positive? Wait, I appreciate them being so forthcoming with their pro-slavery perspective. They were like, and also, Robert E. Lee, our brave hero, put down a slave rebellion, which means, the slaves trying to free themselves went up and killed them. Yeah. They want that shit. They still do. This is acting in line with that ideology. They would go back to that if they could. Anti-MLK propaganda from the 1960s. Yeah. They're doing the same thing today. This is one of the reasons why it's very important to educate yourself on history, because there are so many parallels between what is happening now and what used to happen. And you'll find that the conservatives today are ideologically unchanged from what they were back when they supported segregation and back when they supported slavery. it has not changed. It's completely the same. Nothing is different. There is nothing inherently genetically different in the mind of the average American that would make such values then impossible now. Nothing has changed. DeSantis has also been demanding school records of gender-affirming care. I wonder why our dear leader here would want to construct lists for the state to compile students who sought or received gender-affirming treatment. Not children, by the way. This is universities. So we're looking to create a list of adults consensually and independently seeking out medical care. Here's a short of Charlie Kirk arguing that exact point about slavery. Charlie Kirk saying
So when did
slavery? Charlie Kirk would be goose-stepping with the best of them if he was given the ability to.
End in the United States?
Great question. It began to end in 1777, a process of decoupling from an ancestral evil, where we have more people in the world right now that are slaves today than back then.
That has nothing to do with the question. We have a higher population globally than we did then. And the process of ending slavery didn't begin in 1776, unless your definition for the process includes, like, everything that ever happened before. I guess the process for ending slavery actually began with the beginning of the Mesopotamian Empire, because that actually set into motion everything that would ever happen up to the point where you ended slavery.
Process began 1820s. The debate reignites because of John C. Calhoun, the creation of the cotton gin. We fight a war over it. We win the war, and slavery is abolished.
Skipping over a couple of points here. We didn't fight a war. We had a civil war where about, where half the country declared war on us after seceding to defend the institution of slavery. I mean, the entire South broke off, created state constitutions, which described slavery as the white man's natural right, and so on and so forth. A lot of wheeze going on here, as though Charlie Cook would have been on the northern side there.
That's a pretty awesome track record for a country that inherited an evil that every other country prior to it had. It was the West that got rid of slavery.
See, actually, it's white people should be credited for stopping the slavery that they were doing. Also, England did get rid of slavery before we did, so it's, I don't know how America can really be, like, exceptional here. Not to mention, you can watch that Knowing Better video where it turns out that America still had actual, honest-to-God slaves up until, like, the 1950s. Yeah, for us it was 65, but for Britain, it was 34. A full 31 years before us. 31 years before us. Britain abolished slavery. France abolished it in 1848. That's 17 years before us. And then when we abolished slavery, yeah, we still have a provision in the amendment that allows for slave labor if they've been imprisoned. Yeah, not only did Britain and France get rid of slavery decades before us, they also didn't have to fight a civil war over it. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how much credit you can get here. Like, someone's like, dude, you just spent 8 hours jerking off on like in the middle of the hotel lobby. What the f? And you're like, ah, yes, but I was also the one strong enough after 8 hours of jerking off to finally end the madness. It's like, okay, I mean, all right.
It was William Wilberforce. It was John Edwards. It was George Whitefield. It's easy.
Remember when I was talking with Charlie Kirk about slavery, and I was like, okay, so that's bad. And he was like, yeah, but in which states had slavery? He was like, yeah, okay, the South had slavery. Like, as though like that means anything. Like, oh, dude, you rape a bunch of people in your house. You're like, no, I have a room. I don't rape people in my house. I have a specific room where I bring people to, and then I rape them there. Well, it's like, okay. What? All right. Okay. No, that's the argument he used. You remember. Do you all remember? On Tim Pool? That is unironically what he said.
To kind of do your thing, like, well, it's terrible, it's bad. Yes, it's easy to call balls and strikes on a society you didn't create. It's easy to try to...
What?
Lecture the rest of the country. Be like, these people are so terrible for something you didn't toil for or sacrifice.
What? Wait, what is the argument being made here? How dare you criticize slavery when you weren't even the person to own slaves? I don't even know. I don't even know. I have no clue what the f he's talking about here. Yeah, what do you know about slavery? You didn't own any. What? Yeah, so anyway, the point that I'm trying to get at here is that they want to own slaves again. Nice.